Good morning. Kathy Fung here again with California Common Cause. As Kathy and Catherine just described, FoCE has made some remarkable achievements in just 1 year. And we do believe that the hallmark has been these partnerships. Speaking from personal experience, California Common Cause has worked on a number of groundbreaking bills, including online voter registration and 17-year-old pre-registration, and most recently helping to pass Election Day registration. And while some of those bills seem like no-brainers to us, what we've learned is that you really have to talk to a lot of organizations and bring a lot of people together, stakeholders from different perspectives, in order to build a bill that accurately reflects different interests and perspectives. And so 3 years ago, when we were writing the Election Day registration bill, it was only after we started collaborating with registrars did we figure out some of the logistical and deployment issues. And only after we communicated with the Secretary of State's office that we worked through some of the security and budget concerns. And only after consultation with a lot of the FoCE advocacy groups that we started to refine the language to ensure that the accessibility needs of many different organizations and groups were better reflected in that bill. And ultimately, that's what passed in 2012. So as we think about any of these reforms that we might be putting out there for the future, we have to remember that to do it, we can't just go at it alone. We have to figure out how to communicate with a lot of different stakeholders. I want to start by asking Jennie Bretschneider. Oh, there you are, Jennie. You're the Assistant Chief, Deputy, and Counsel for the Secretary of State. Give us a few examples of partnerships that you've helped to foster at the Secretary of State's office, and particularly in the last year, what have you seen as productive examples to share with the audience?
Thank you. And if you could give us the amount of time we each have.
I think you have about 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to join this morning's panel. I'm Assistant Chief Deputy for Secretary of State Deborah Bowen, and I've been working primarily on overseeing projects since 2007. And the approach that we take at the Secretary of State's office, and that I've always taken even when I worked for her in the Capitol, is collaborative public policy. I worked in local government when I started my career, and I worked in the legislature for about 10 years for Secretary Bowen. And it always makes sense to collaborate with all the interests, whether they're opponents or proponents. Some of the projects that I've worked on for Secretary Bowen are the NVRA partnership that we have, and that is with ACLU as well as Project Vote. And that's been a 4-year partnership where we've been working on statewide compliance with the National Voter Registration Act. And that's been a wonderful partnership. We've seen lawsuits happen in other states, and we've been fortunate in California to be working collaboratively with voting rights groups on that issue. I've also worked on post-election auditing standards. We had a working group back in 2007, and Kim Alexander from the California Voter Foundation was on that working group. And we now have a pilot project with 20 different counties that's federally funded. And the Common Cause and Verified Voting are on that advisory panel, so we're collaborating with counties as well as voting rights groups on that. And of course, in 2012, I oversaw the California Online Voter Registration Project for the Secretary. And that's really a prime example of collaborative public policy. FoCE was really a driving force, as you all know, behind that legislation. And FoCE created an implementation task force that had really some key impacts on decisions that were made after the bill passed, but before implementation. So for example, we had to make decisions at the Secretary of State's office on who would have access to that system, whether it was just going to be people that had driver's licenses or everyone in California, what the deadline to register was going to be and how that was going to look. And so I'm happy to report that we made some really great policy decisions with consensus from FoCE and other groups that allowed all Californians to use the system, and that's different from other states. That means whether you have a driver's license or not, you can apply to register to vote online. The deadline, of course, is midnight, 15 days before the election, but the question was, are we going to allow applications that are incomplete to be considered submitted on time? And we did. And again, that was something that FoCE suggested to us. And so, these are examples of how, if you collaborate from the start, before the legislation even gets introduced, and you stay there at the table and you work through the legislation, and then you even stay there through implementation, you can have a major impact.
Great. Let's turn now to Michelle Romero. You're the Greenlining Institute's Democracy Program Director. And one of the FoCE projects that you worked on was improving the voter guide. It's a pretty daunting thing because the voter guide that we all get is a fairly large booklet. It's required by law to have certain information in it. And to decide to make some of those changes so close to a major election meant that you really had to focus in on what you were going to try to recommend. Tell us a little bit about how Greenlining Institute identified some of the improvements to the voter guide, and then also how you worked in partnership with a lot of other organizations and county registrars to make some of those improvements with the Secretary of State's office.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kathy. So actually, I want to just say about a year and a half ago, Greenlining Institute set out on an effort to identify a set of ballot initiative reforms. And so we were touring the state and talking with voters about, what information they need to make informed decisions and what they thought about the initiative process. And we were finding actually a lot of information that was unexpected because we weren't looking for it at the time about how the voter guide could be improved, how useful or not useful it was for various groups. And so we had this in mind going into our meetings with the Future of California Elections group when we convened, and we had, been thinking on these things. How do we improve this tool? It makes sense that there aren't, different voter guides circulated out there, that at least the official voter guide can be a useful tool to as many constituents as possible. And so how do we do that? And so with this in mind, we talked with the Future of California Elections participants and decided that would be one of the collaborative projects we worked on. And so it turns out we weren't the only ones that thought there was room for improvement. Without that collaboration, I think we probably wouldn't have gotten to the point where we were able to talk with the Secretary of State's office months before the election, right, about making changes on such a short time frame. But it was really in partnership with election officials and others who had some of these relationships, and then with civil rights groups who could convene these community listening sessions and bring the grassroots into those conversations, that we were able to do that. So a couple of examples to give you. Kathy told me, I want concrete. So this is what we did. First, Greenlining Institute, with the input from the members that were on that particular working group looking at the voter guide, developed a curriculum for focused community input sessions. And we asked ourselves, what do we want to learn? What changes do we think are feasible on this timeline? And so we had a conversation at the onset of this with the Secretary of State's office to learn what's the timeline look like, what can we really do within the boundaries that we've got, and and those really very real and practical constraints. And then we went around and we asked different constituent groups what they thought. We used the June primary voter guide as an example. We were able to compare that to other forms of a voter guide that are in other states, or the League of Women Voters Easy Voter Guide, some of you may be familiar with. And we identified a number of things, some things that had to do with the organization of content. And so if you noticed in your November guide, the November guide actually had tabs along the side for you to more easily flip through. Thank the Future of California Elections group. And then also, for a lot of recommendations for language minority communities. I don't know if you ever noticed this, but on the back of the voter guide, it said on the June primary guide, for more information or to receive a voter guide in another language, call this number. It was in English. So that's great if you speak English and you want another guide, but we had to make sure that that was translated. And so those are some of the things that we were able to accomplish in the hard copy guide, as well as doing some of this kind of thing, looking at the online versions.
Great. Our next speaker is Dean Logan, who I have known, I think, pretty much since you've come to Los Angeles to first be the deputy and then eventually to serve as the Los Angeles County Registrar-Recorder and County Clerk. I said it all. And it's been exciting having you as a partner in Los Angeles and certainly as a leader in thinking about how we can improve collaborations. You've been involved in a number of different projects. The new online voter registration system that helped to register or to renew and update information for about 1.3 million voters just before the November 2012 elections. That started from an informal conversation that you and I were having about how we could make some advances. And then you've also been working, we hear, on a system that might break the mold for how voting systems are developed and who develops them. Talk to us a little bit about how FoCE partnerships with organizations that you might not previously have regularly been talking to have helped to move some of those projects forward.
Okay. Great. Well, good morning, and thank you, Kathy, and also to the Irvine Foundation for putting this together. It's so encouraging to see this many people show up for a forum that's focused on the future of voting. And as we go through this period right after a presidential election, often people in our field are called to forums where we're reacting to the last presidential election, or in some cases, the last 3 presidential elections. And it's great to finally be in a forum where we're really focused on the future of where we want to go in California. So that in and of itself, I think, exemplifies the power of the partnership that is formed through the Future of California Elections group. It wasn't that long ago that people in my role would find themselves in a room with the other participants in FoCE, but only in courtrooms or in depositions or in legislative hearings, not at round tables discussing policy issues and how we can move them forward together. And it has been phenomenal to work in this collaborative fashion and to see the rewards that have come from it. And so you've already heard some examples. I'll just offer a couple of highlights in regard to those and maybe a couple of others. Online voter registration, I think, is the hallmark of our effort. It had a tremendous impact in the 2012 election and was highly successful, and I think highly for the cooperation of the groups that you see represented here. It's something, if you think about it, you want to think very carefully about making that type of a policy or operational change as close to a presidential election as that happened in California. And again, I don't think that could have happened without a meeting of the minds and the agreements that took place that led to that legislation. But I think we can look back on it now and see that it was worth it. It was worth pushing for it, even under the time frames and the constraints that we operated under, and we have tangible results that we can point to. And it really was breaking through the barriers of the political, the operational, and the time frame constraints that would have been easy reasons to say no, not to do that in California before the 2012 election. And it was because people came and persevered through something that maybe shouldn't have taken the effort that it had to take, but it was worth the effort that it did take. So online voter registration, and a sub-part of that was the first time, I believe, in California to actually have a National Voter Registration Day where we focused, again, through those partnerships, both on promoting the online voter registration tool, but also promoting voter registration in general right before the election. So I can tell you just statistically that the impact it had in LA County was huge. In the short period of time from September 19th through the close of registration for the general election, we had over 200,000 people registered to vote in LA County alone. And on the final day of registration, 88,000 of those transactions came in through the online portal. And those are people who otherwise would not have been able to change their address, get registered, and have the opportunity to participate in the election. And so when I think about was it worth it, those numbers really speak to me. 2 other examples I'll give real quickly about in terms of partnership. We also, this was the first election cycle after the census, and LA County was based on census data, is covered under new language requirements under the Voting Rights Act. We had 2 new language categories, a little bit unique. This time it wasn't specific languages, it was categories of languages. Asian Indian as a category, and Asian other not specified. So as we sought out to figure out how do you decide how to provide voting materials and voting services to people in Asian other not specified, that's when you go to these kind of partnerships. You go to the people who understand and work with the communities that need those services. They help you to figure out the demographics, where you need to target those efforts, which specific languages in those categories need to be focused on. And again, we had a tremendous success with that. Now in LA County, we now provide language assistance in 9 languages in writing and 11 languages when you consider the bilingual poll worker services we provide at our polling places. And then the final example that I'll give at this point in the panel is, as Kathy referenced, is our voting systems assessment project in LA County. And there'll be further discussion on this later today, but one of the areas that I hope we all will focus on as we look at the future of voting in California is the need to replace aging voting technology and voting systems in California. LA County is perhaps at the unique stage of that because we are literally at the end of the life cycle of our current voting system, and there is no voting system out there available today on the market that can be legally implemented in California that will meet the needs of LA County with the language requirements we have, with the demographics we have, and we need to really look at a new model for doing that. And we've pioneered that effort in LA County, but we haven't done it in a vacuum. We've done it with the collaboration, the advice, and the partnership of the same organizations that make up the future of California elections. And there's much work ahead on that, but I think we'll see the same success that we've seen with online registration, the same success that we saw with the language requirements, the same success we've had with the partnerships with election protection. We'll see that also in the Voting Systems Project, and I have that confidence because of what we've gone through together.
Thank you, Dean. Heather Smith, president of Rock the Vote. You're the only person who I know who gets to regularly appear on E! Channel and MTV leading up to the elections. We can only count on local public access. But online voter registration has certainly been a game changer and a major accomplishment of the Future of California Elections partnership with the Secretary of State. The estimates are that as many as 300,000 new voters might have been under the age of 35, which is pretty remarkable. Can you tell us a little bit about how the FoCE partnerships went beyond just the technical implementation and really helped to nurture the outreach to a larger population and ensure that this whole new generation of voters was tapped into?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for Kathy for bringing us together today, and to Catherine Hazelton and Irvine for supporting and bringing us together at the Future of California Elections, and Kathy, Darling, Allen, for your leadership. And one of the things that you said when you introduced the conference this morning was that a bunch of us who used to not be in the same room together, though, actually do share a common purpose of engaging more people and making these elections run well and encouraging democracy in the state of California, somehow weren't collaborating towards that goal. And so this has been an incredible opportunity for us at Rock the Vote to work with so many people, and it's the outcome, I think, speaks for itself. But what it also did was allow us to rethink in this moment how engagement and participation and elections should run, and how we can make California a model for that, and how civil rights organizations and community organizations and elections officials should be working together, and what each of our roles should be to ensure that the most efficient and the most effective programs were in place to engage as many voters in a productive election program and process. And so at this particular time, there's a rising millennial generation. There's an increased diversity amongst the population here in the state, and there's a technology boom that is kind of changing how these things run. So it was a nice opportunity and an appropriate moment to rethink that. And so at Rock the Vote, we decided to join this. It's rare for us to do state-specific work. We tend to run national programs, but it was the right decision, and we're really excited about what happened. We tried to rethink what role Rock the Vote and organizations like ours could play. Our assets are that we are in communities and we know how to speak directly to young people. What if we use that to bring more people into the process and then actually let the elections officials be the ones to handle those forms and do the work that they do best? And can we set up technologies and programs collectively that work for both of us? And I think we did that, or at least tried to do a bunch of different things this year to figure out where to go next. On the field side, Rock the Vote leveraged its brand, its celebrities, its artists, our young people, our volunteers in the state of California, and set up events that attracted a younger audience, and then worked directly with the elections officials in those cities and in those counties to staff the registration booths and to assist us in setting it up so that their outreach staff, we could provide opportunities for them to do outreach directly into these communities. I'll give you two quick examples. One we called Surf the Vote. Unfortunately, Neil Kelly isn't here, but it was one of our favorite things. We brought together rock bands on the beaches and had concerts, and Neil and his staff from Orange County were out there getting those folks registered that we brought together. The second is, which Dean Logan referenced, but we held a National Voter Registration Day. We timed it with the day that the online voter registration system went live here in the state of California. We held events in collaboration with our partners at college campuses and communities around the country and here in the state, but also together a great big concert in Los Angeles where Dean Logan got to go on stage and rap with Murs and or Sean. And
I will just say that there are pictures.
There are
and
pictures.
You can contact us offline for a small price.
That's right. I threatened that I would show it, just start flashing it on the screen here.
You could tweet it.
We can tweet it later.
Dean and an eye patch.
I wasn't wearing the iPad.
That wasn't him, by the way, in case you couldn't tell the difference of them on stage. No, but it worked so well to have their staff, the elections officials and staff out there doing the registration, and for us to be able to bring our audience together to get involved. So we tried a bunch of things in the field. We also produced some materials with celebrities, like videos about the history of voting and why it matters, that folks are now using in high school classrooms. So we could provide that kind of fun, exciting content that then can be used by our partners on the election official side to make it more interesting. And then last but not least, we started to do a lot of work in the online space. And Rock the Vote has had an online voter registration tool that has allowed community organizations to present the registration opportunity to their audiences, their members, their constituents, and we worked very closely on a kind of phase one with the Secretary of State's office to actually sync that up with the state system so that people who started with Rock the Vote or with one of our community partners, we could send them over to the state so that they could finish the process there online. And I think it really sets a standard for what is possible if we're allowed to do the outreach and promotion into our communities and focus our energy and attention there in places where we know how to reach people and we know how to bring them in, and then pass them over to the state to finish that process so that they're going directly into an electronic system that works for county elections officials and state elections officials. We could be, collectively engage millions and millions of voters here in the state of California that wouldn't otherwise be registered and involved in our elections. So I think we had some great success in 2012. It was our first year working together. I know we brought in nearly 200,000 voters through our programs here in the state, and we look forward to continuing and building on the success that we had this year.
Great.
So thank you.
Darren Chesin, you're the consultant, which I don't know that name even begins to collect all of the experience and wealth of knowledge that you've gathered over the years for the California Senate Committee on Elections and Constitutional Amendments. You've seen your fair share of bills, some of them very good ones, never get past square one. share your thoughts about the challenges that a bill faces when it hasn't yet been vetted by a diverse group of stakeholders, and maybe some examples of ones that have made it through because they've got that appropriate check-in that's happened along the way.
Well, first, I'm still trying to process the visual of Dean up there, with a baseball cap turned sideways rapping or something like so. I
said,
I do want to see the picture.
Contact Heather.
Thanks. Our committee, and there's dozens of committees, policy committees in the legislature. We're kind of unique. We have 120 members. They come from all different walks of life, different previous professions, vocations. The one thing they all have in common was they all successfully navigated a campaign. They won their election. So not only do they all feel like they're experts in that policy area, but anytime you have a significant change to the rules of the game, and certainly something like online voter registration would be a example of that. You're asking them. It'd be like asking the San Francisco Giants. Okay, they won 2 out of the last 3 World Series. Do you guys want to see us make some significant changes to the rules of baseball? Nah, it's been working out for us, pretty well lately. So, without groups coming together, building coalitions, raising that comfort level, the members are very reluctant to see those rules change, whether that's something about that affects them as a candidate, voting, political reform. It's very, very tough. Some of the stuff that you think is a no-brainer, I'm here to tell you, nothing is ever a no-brainer. The Political Reform Act, any changes to that requires a 2/3 vote. Okay, we have 2/3 in each house now of Democrats. That's not going to make a huge difference. Again, you're talking about changing the rules of the game that they are successful at. Mm-hmm. And without getting lots of groups involved from all perspectives, the press, the good government groups, the counties, the county registrars, Secretary of State, everybody. It's so easy to kill one of these bills, and there's so many opportunities to do it. Multiple committees, each floor, got to get a governor's signature. So without, again, without a broad coalition representing all possible interests, you're just not going to achieve that comfort level. Perception is reality, especially in politics, so especially when you're talking about changing something related to the Political Reform Act, disclosure bill, campaign contribution limits, anything like that. Those are really easy to kill. If the FPPC doesn't, bless it, they get to decide what is in furtherance of the purposes of the Political Reform Act. It's almost dead on arrival. So mm-hmm. Everybody has to be on board. As far as examples, obviously, the biggest and most recent online voter reg, that did actually start out back in 2008. Senator Ron Calderon was our chair, and that was the first online voter registration bill that sort of set the stage for everything. It was dependent on VoCal getting up and running, and the Yee bill, Senator Yee's bill, kick-started it. But when we did it back in 2008, Arizona was the only state doing it. Now there's several. Talk about trying to, sufficiently raise the comfort level. We had AARP, Common Cause, League of Women Voters, Secretary of State, City of LA, Cal State Student Association, and some groups that were vitally important that you may not associate with elections policy, groups representing the military and veterans. We had a Republican governor at the time, Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Department of Finance came out almost immediately to oppose the bill, okay? the veterans groups and the Department of Defense, because they obviously knew it would greatly assist military personnel living overseas to easily register, they were very helpful in not only getting us, we got actually a handful of Republican votes in the Assembly for the bill, which we didn't expect at all. We thought it was going to go strict party line, and we thought it was a real long shot getting the governor to sign it. They were so helpful in getting some of those Republicans on board and getting the governor to sign the bill. Again, groups that you see these American Legion guys walking around with their little hats with all little buttons on them. They show up in committee, and the members were paying very close attention. So it really helped. A couple other things, more recent examples. Last year, our chair, Senator Correa, had a bill dealing with deceptive practices on slave mailers. We got a group representing firefighters, law enforcement, Secretary of State, the good government groups at Common Cause and others. Again, this stuff's, the candidates who then become the members of the legislature, they rely on these kinds of communications. They do business with these people. And unless you can show that, again, there's broad support from all the stakeholders, this stuff's not going to get through. Any little negative story in the press can kill something in an instant. Again, perception is absolutely reality. One of the last one, this to the uneducated person, this would probably seem like something really minor. There was a bill by Senator Kehoe last year, which should have the effect of moving most, if not all, of county central committee elections from every primary to just the presidential primaries. And you think, well, big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Ask your county registrar-recorder. Ask Dean Logan how big a deal that is. That was, like moving a mountain, highly controversial. The members don't like to mess with central committees. They rely on them for endorsements and volunteers, and boy, it took a lot of work by a lot of parties. Again, Secretary of State, the county elections officials, everybody involved. Because of the top two primary, the central committees were pretty much the only thing left in the gubernatorial primary that was party specific. That costs a lot of money, a lot of extra, ballots, different ballot styles. So getting them to change their ways, and you're going to go tell a bunch of county central committees that, hey, guess what? Instead of having your elections every 2 years, now they're going to be every 4 years. This is tough stuff. Again, there's no such thing as a no-brainer. I took my kids to see the movie Lincoln, and I said, you guys, you think in retrospect that something like the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution was a no-brainer, right? Seems like it now, and look what it took to get it passed. And I said, this stuff goes on all the time. You had to get all these different groups involved, and it's essential, especially for
So you've got a
anything
bunch of guys out in a shed who are looking up information. No, sorry, that was then. We
we
don't do that anymore.
We allowed one,
We don't do
offered
that
somebody
anymore.
the job as postmaster of Ohio to get
Yeah,
their vote.
exactly. So, quick round of questions, short answers if I could ask our panelists, and then I want to open it up to questions from the audience. So be thinking about questions that you might have. I think we have a microphone that's free, and we'll just pass it over to the end if people want to ask any questions from the audience. So let me first ask Darren, as you look at 2013's election-related bills, which ones do you think are gaining a little bit of buzz or have the most buzz in the legislature? What should we be watching out for?
Everything and anything to do with campaign disclosure. We have this issue now that got a tremendous amount of media attention on running money through nonprofit corporations, which ultimately wind up in the hands of a a ballot measure campaign committee, and nobody has any idea where the money really came from. I'm sure you all saw it. There was a committee that was formed, or I should say participated in the no on Prop 30, yes on Prop 32 campaigns. They got a big chunk of their money, it was like $11 million from a nonprofit corporation. The FPPC tried to force them to disclose where that money actually came from. They went to court. Ultimately, they found out that it came from 2 other nonprofit corporations. So there's a bill by Chair Senator Correa's SB 27 that's going to deal with setting up a system of tests and presumptions that will hopefully lead to having that money disclosed. We're also going to see bills, I know, Senator Yee again, Senator Leno, Senator Ted Lieu are already looking and pursuing legislation with different aspects of disclosure on air, TV, and radio. Right now, we do require the committee that paid for the ad to identify itself and their major donors, but it's just a mishmash of information. It's almost too much information. I know there's going to be an effort to sort of narrow that down to the really important stuff. If it were up to me, you'd have like a little ticker running across the bottom, or like you see on ESPN with the sports scores, paid for by, and here's the 3 top contributors or something like that. That's the kind of stuff we're going to see. Again, this is going to be controversial stuff, and you're talking about, it sounds like a no-brainer, but you're talking about requiring nonprofit organizations to possibly tell us where they're getting their money from. Oh, I've already been visited by some biggies, that are, all American, organizations that everybody loves, has grave concerns about what this may lead to.
Right.
So we will need all your help.
This is a question for Dean, Michelle, and Heather. If you could prioritize one new issue for FoCE to bring together a working group on, what would that issue be? And if you can do it in a sentence, that'd be great, or 2.
I think one issue that has statewide importance is the frequency of elections and the consolidation, the need to consolidate elections and deal with the way we conduct vacancy elections in this state, because local government is spending millions of dollars on elections on dates that voters are not familiar with, and resulting in turnout in, if you're lucky, in the teens, in which people are elected, and oftentimes those people who are elected are giving up other offices, which leads to a domino effect where then you're waiting to hold another vacancy election. So
How many registrars would want to work on that issue? Get a show of hands. And other people in the room, anybody? Okay, we're signing you all up, and Dean's going to head up that committee. Michelle.
When it comes to policy, I think that we've seen a lot of wins with online voter registration in terms of the number of people we're registering. There's still a lot of work to be done. And so one thing I would say is to look at who is outside of the box, right? Who is in the non-eligible pool that should be in the eligible pool when you think about our shifting demographics. And so thinking about folks on parole being allowed to vote, for instance, the large number of undocumented citizens we've got here who can't vote, and generations that are raised here who can't vote due to flawed immigration policies and what impact they have on electoral participation. And then I think, building on some of the work that we did this year, the voter guide and voter information seems like such a dull subject, perhaps. It's not the sexy headline. But there's a lot of implications for whether folks feel engaged, what decisions they're making ultimately, when they get their ballot or not. And one of the things, for example, Kathy, that we found was some folks hadn't even gotten their state ballot. They might have gotten their counties, but not the state one, or the state one and not the county. Well, if you've got 2 and you don't even know to be expecting 2, do you even call to get that other ballot, or do you just wait to go to cast your ballot and realize there's some stuff missing here, and why don't I have that information? So I think building on the work that we did this year, and then also looking at who's outside the box.
Show of hands, who's interested in working on expanding the electorate and working on improving voter information? Yeah. All right. Michelle's the committee head, so you
Sign
all
up
talk to
here.
her. And then, Heather, tell us what you would want to create a working
I'm
group
a little
on.
afraid I might become
Uh-oh.
a committee head. Just kidding.
You got to move out to California and just stay here.
Well, it's really cold in DC right now. In 2 sentences or less, I would do 2 things. One, I would continue to focus on the implementation of online voter registration in a way that, as I was saying earlier, allows organizations in communities to promote the tool and gather just enough to turn those people out, so we can focus on their education and participation while passing them into a system that is effective and efficient for the elections officials who are processing those forms and managing those lists. I think there's a lot of potential there. So that would be one. And the second thing I would focus on is civic education. And coming out of this election, I just felt like, so many people missed the deadline because they didn't know it existed. So many people didn't get registered because they didn't know that they had to. The number of phone calls that we received at our office was just heartbreaking. And so if there was some way so that when an election comes around, people actually know how to navigate the elections process in our democracy and understand what's at stake, so of course they want to vote, we'd have a very different democracy in this country. So I would say that no American child should go without a civic education, and we should start that here in California.
Great. Civic education, everybody. Oh, applause.
All right.
So you do have to
I
move
will
out
head
here.
that committee.
All right. Jennie, what advice would you give to registrars, advocates, people who work in policy making, legislators to think about as they pursue their 2013 election priorities?
And I don't want to head a committee, but I do want to mention one other thing that we ought to think about focusing on, which
If
is
you say it, it's a committee.
pre-registration. 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they're in high school, they're in a classroom where they're taking U.S. history and government classes. They're heading to the DMV to get their driver's license permit. And they're starting to get online. They're getting on Facebook at that young age, and we ought to allow them to register to vote. We have California online voter registration now. We have EMS systems, election management systems in California. All 3 vendor systems have the capability of holding applications in queue until someone turns 18 and putting those folks into processing when they turn 18. So there's
Because
no
as
reason.
I've understood from some of our registrars, apparently some of them are forced to use shoe boxes right now. Is
Well,
that right?
in the paper-based
so-
system, of course, a county had a couple of options: get a shoebox or return the application if you were too young. So, but with online voter registration, it's different now.
Yeah.
So we ought to think about that.
That's exciting. Good.
And then in terms of just advice for advocacy groups, I mean, again, I've been working on public policy my entire career, and FoCE is doing all of the things that you would hope to be happening in collaborative public policy making. But I just want to say 3 things. Set the bar high, but don't walk away when reality sets in. Your role is to push for the best possible public policy given unlimited resources, and you know that. When I was in law school taking alternative dispute resolution and mediation classes, we learned that the successful negotiator always makes the initial offer. It sets an anchor. And FoCE has been extremely effective at doing that. You're setting the anchor, you're proposing the bill, you're proposing the policy that is the best policy, regardless of budget and time constraints. At the same time, though, it's equally important to be ready to negotiate and stay at the table, to be ready to compromise, because inevitably reality sets in: budget constraints, political constraints, time constraints. So to be effective, you have to stay at the table, you have to collaborate, you have to keep influencing that process from start to finish, from legislation to implementation. Second, build a consensus among your advocacy groups and then approach the agency and then approach the local elected official. In the first couple of years of Secretary Bowen's tenure, we had a lot of groups asking for a lot of things, and sometimes those things conflicted with each other, and it was too much. It was too many things at one time. Make your wish list, prioritize, decide on one big thing, maybe a couple of smaller things in one given year, and then present that, either as a bill or as a policy change to the local elected officials. Keep in mind that we love taking on new projects and new challenges, but there's a limit to what we can get done all at one time. And you know that government has had serious budget cuts in the last 5 years. Most agencies have been cut 25%. I think county agencies have been cut more like 30%. So just keep that in mind. And FoCE has really been effective at bringing those groups together and getting this kind of thing done to make sure that you can be effective and we can be effective. Third, develop and maintain relationships. I mean, this is obvious. Collaboration is built on mutual trust and respect. Yeah, I have to say, resist the urge to issue a press release if you find a problem or if you're not getting exactly what you want. It's really tough to collaborate and communicate openly if one side can't trust the other side to pick up the phone and call first if you're hearing about a problem. So please do call us first. Many of you have our direct lines. I will give you my direct number. It's 916-651-8297. Call me, call Evan, call someone else at the Secretary of State's office if you see something going the wrong way. But I would say the same thing for the county elected officials. I mean, FoCE has really been the first time, as we've been saying over and over again, that everyone has come together and starting to really build that trust. But it, you know, although you might reach a short-term goal by issuing a release or saying something critical in the press, you're not going to have your long-term goals met, which is, you know, this long-term goal of working together on projects collaboratively together towards a common goal. Coordinate communication in your organization. Make sure the left hand's talking to the right. Sometimes you have certain advocates saying one thing over here, and then you've got the key person who's collaborating on a given project, you know, doing something different. Choose one lead representative to communicate and stay in touch with the official's office. And again, I'm talking about county or state. Figure out how that key staffer in the agency or the county elections office likes to communicate. Is it by phone call? Is it by email? Is it by regular set conference call times every month? Or do they like to do it on an as-needed basis as things arise? Figure that out because it's going to make you more effective. And take the time to get to know the people you're collaborating with on a personal level. It makes you more effective as an advocate, but it also makes coming to work fun. I mean, I've been collaborating with a lot of you over the years, and it's been really great to get to know you, your families, and what you're about. So, and I'm not sure if we'll have a chance to speak again, but I just want to say thank you. It's really been a wonderful experience over the last 6 years. And we've got 2 years left, and we're looking forward to hearing from you guys on what else you want to get done.
Lots of really sound advice. Okay, so let's get some questions from the audience. If you want to stand up, you can either stand at your table and ask a question if you've got a really loud voice, or you can approach the microphone up front and ask your question. So I would just ask, just so that we can move it along quickly, stay standing until I call on you, or go to the microphone, and I'll just try to make sure that we cover the whole room. Yes, gentleman in the back.
My name is Ted from California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and we work with the disabled community, and so that's kind of the perspective that we approach all of our election stuff with. And just to start off, I want to wish everyone a happy Ed Roberts Day. It's Ed Roberts Day in California, the founder of the Independent Living Movement, and if you don't know about Ed Roberts, please go to yodisabledandproud.org and look him up. He was the first head of the Department of Rehabilitation. But I see a lot of, in listening to everything, I hear a lot of really great grassroots interaction in developing progress for voter guides, the online voter registration system, you know, all of this voter education, voter registration, voter interaction and activity. In my position, I work with 37 organizers across the state in something called the Systems Change Network. And we work with thousands of people with disabilities across the state to help them organize, advocate for themselves. And one of the things that kept coming up was they felt that the voter guides just weren't accessible enough, whether they be online or in print, that the online voter registration website was not fully accessible to people across disability. So I really kind of want to know what you all are thinking going forward as you do the next round of grassroots interaction that leads up to making things better, how you're going to interact and invite people with disabilities into those community forums to get their feedback. Because the biggest feedback that I got back was that people in the disability community didn't feel invited to the table in that process.
I'm not sure if I can speak on behalf of FoCE. I do know that there were some organizations that were involved that spoke for, at least represented issues that were important to the disability rights community, including Hillary Sklar from Disability Rights California. But that's not, one or two voices is not everybody, and so absolutely we need to be inclusive. I will say that Greenlining's process for going out there and figuring out how to improve the voter guide actually involved going out into the community, right? And so maybe if we think about future rounds, it could be inclusive of additional organizations.
Yeah, I think Kathy's right. So Hillary was involved, and there were some changes even to the online guide that we were able to recommend, like size format, right, on the screen of different pages that would make it more accessible. But I think even with online voter registration, you saw similar things happen with language minority communities, right? The form was available, I think, in Spanish at some point, but not in other languages. So there's still a lot of work to do. I think a marker of this group is, something that Jennie said that resonated was that, we're at the table and we realize that these things are not perfect and that this is a long-term partnership. And so when I said, what should we work on in 2013, I said, well, let's continue building on our work. Let's not just call certain things a win and then move on to the next thing. There's a lot of work to do in that. Still, even with online voter registration as successful as it was. So Greenlining Institute, thank you, Kathy, for reminding me, has another set of community listening sessions that's going to be coming up, and the Leo Educational Fund is partnering with us on that as well. I imagine that our membership meeting later this week, where we're going to be discussing, what our priorities will be for this year, will help to inform the content of those sessions. But come see me after the session if you're interested in getting your constituents involved. We are always looking for community groups to partner with who are willing to help bring folks together.
There you go. All right, next question. Yes, stand up, say your name, organization if you could.
My name is Floyd. I was involved in a campaign last year called My For Our Future, where we engage and empower youth, college and high school students to outreach to underrepresented groups, including immigrants, low-income, and youth. And we had a tremendous successful campaign because we partnered with education institutions such as County School of Education. We partnered with local school districts. We partner with Yale College, County Registrar Office, and what we find is that there are a lot of schools and classes do not teach civic education. And I was really shocked because it wasn't taught in government classes. So I think that something needs to be done at state and also national level. I think that civic education could be taught, could begin in elementary school. So this is just an idea that I think that this group can push for. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so question about civic education. Does somebody on our panel want to tackle that? And so what I'm going to do is just one panelist answering so that we can get through as many questions as possible. Go ahead, Dean. You grab the mic first.
I'll just say something really quickly about that. I think it sounds like most everyone in this room would agree about that. I think as we're debating that in terms of it becoming a priority at the state and national level, I think one of the benefits of the partnership model that we're talking about here is that you can learn that in the interim there are ways that we can impact that. So one of the things we've been able to do in partnership with community organizations in LA County in response to situations like what happened in the city of Bell, where there was a huge controversy and a lack of public confidence and trust in the process, we were able to go out prior to that election cycle and conduct community workshops that empowered voters to know what their rights and responsibilities as voters were, and that they didn't have to depend on information that was coming from external sources, that the right to vote and the voting process belongs to the electorate. It doesn't belong to the city. It doesn't belong to the county. It doesn't belong to the state or the nation. And we were able to present those workshops in partnership so we could provide the technical information about here's how you get a ballot, here's where you should return a voted ballot. You should return it to a mailbox or a ballot box, not to a police officer, not to a campaign worker, or those types of things, which seem really basic, but oftentimes can be overlooked in our civics process. So again, endorsing what you're speaking about in terms of the national and state emphasis, but also recognizing that those are those little nuggets of of success that we together can accomplish that most of us on our own can't do.
Great. Next question. All right. Are you standing up? Yes, all right. So we've got two, and then I'll come back. Go ahead.
Hi, Steve Weir, Registrar-Voters for Contra Costa County for the next 65 days.
Boo.
But who's counting?
But Heather rocked the vote I'm interested. In the last election, those that are 20 to 29 represented less than 10% of our vote by mail voters, but they represented over a third of those who had their ballots rejected because their signature didn't match. And we somehow need to get in the youngsters' minds that that signature is a security device, and we're going to check it. And I'm not exactly sure how we can engage them in that.
It's a really interesting situation that I actually didn't know about. But I mean, I think there's two things that come to mind immediately, which could be added to the role of the community organization who has a relationship with that voter, and in the teaching them how to navigate this process, right? So I'll use Rock the Vote as an example since I know it. But when Rock the Vote registers a young person, whether it's at a concert or festival at their college campus or through our online tools, we capture just enough information to be able to communicate with them about the next steps of that process. So once their form gets processed or turned in, hopefully through just submitting it or sending their information to the state's system, we are able to follow up and say, great, now that you've done that, the next thing you need to know is your voting booth is at X location. You need to bring X, Y, and Z forms of identification if you're voting for the first time. And, it's going to look like this, and you're going to do this, right? It's just very basic processy stuff. As a result of that kind of ushering through, we found that voters who come in for the first time through our systems are as much as 30 points more likely to show up and turn out. And it goes to the civic education issue, which is people just simply don't understand how the process works. And maybe one of the things that we can start doing once, so now we have a couple million people in our programs, about 3.5 million who've come through our programs since in the last 7 years. We communicate with them around every deadline and every election. Once they're a part of our programs, we try to keep them. We can start raising this issue of signature validation as well as one of those just pieces of information. We could add it into our civics programming that we're developing as a stopgap until we can do more widespread work. But yeah, it's an interesting issue, and in fact, probably points to a benefit of groups like this, and that we don't think about those things all the time, but hearing that that's an issue from your side is super helpful.
Steve, I'd love it if you could jot down some of the stats that you just shared with us. Okay, great. And then later on after the panel, pass it back to us. All right, we had a question over here, and then I'm going to go over somewhere in this arena. There's oh, thank you. There you are. All right, good.
Yeah, I'm Sharon Sweeney, a commissioner from Santa Clara County, election commissioner. And long before Hoy got involved with her education project, I was doing one alone through our Registrar Voters office. And we found that over the years, requests for bringing teachers into, special teachers, perhaps from the League of Women Voters, which is what I was from, to teach high school students about the voting process, it fell off. And we have no one really advocating at our county Board of Education, not the Board of Education, but the Office of Education, to really get the word out to the teachers in all the schools in our county. And this is maybe something that each of your groups could look at somewhere down the line to get the word out that there are volunteers out there, like the League members, who can teach the students about the whole process. And one of the things that I did when I spoke to high school seniors was register those who were 17 and 18. And at that time, our county held up some of those 17-year-olds in the little box, and they registered them on their birthday. And it was a really wonderful program. And I'm glad to hear that you're doing that online. However, the real problem is that the teachers are not getting the word.
Right.
So if there could be some way to filter that.
I think definitely going to take that into consideration. I know that we've got civic education on our agenda. Let me, if I could, just as moderator's privilege, I'm a young parent. I have a daughter who's entering first grade. So I've suddenly gotten thrust into this world of what you can do with curriculum and what you can't, and class hours and instruction time, and what can your outside parent teachers group do. I think we should think creatively, because I think the long-term plan may be about trying to reintroduce civics education into the classroom. There are shorter, quicker solutions as well, as Dean has suggested, that may involve, for instance, working with county registrars to come up with creative ways of teaching things, and then using school assemblies and parent teacher collaboration with the school to get it into a school that doesn't harm instruction time, but at the same time gets that information in front of students. And I know that the pressure that a lot of our administrators are under to make sure that we teach as many hours of math and science and reading is a difficult one to navigate through. But I think that we can come up with creative solutions, because I think we all agree that civics education is something that's important. So it's just a matter of figuring out how we crack that nut. Okay, I think there was a question over here.
Robert Benson. I represent the Black Business Association in Los Angeles County. I'm the Northern California representative. I'm in Contra Costa County. Looking at your report, it appears as though your focus was on statewide elections. Is that correct?
Which report are you looking at?
The one that's in the program.
A lot of our groups do work across the state collaboratively, but as you will see, a lot of the members are people who have specific responsibilities in a particular county.
Well, my question is related to ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if anything's been looked at in terms of the impact of ranked choice voting on voter turnout and voter participation. I think there's some areas there that probably need to be looked at. Does anybody have any information on that?
It's a good question. Does anybody on the panel want to take it? Okay.
Well, I mean, we'd want to ask John Arnst in San Francisco, and I think Alameda County as well, Dave McDonald. Those two counties are the two counties that have ranked choice voting right now. So they would have data on local elections and how that's affecting turnout.
Yeah. And we certainly at FoCE have raised the question. And in our first year, I think because we were working towards consensus, we decided it was something that we wanted to keep on our agenda, but think about it as something that we needed to do additional research on and build greater support for within the group to tackle. And certainly I know that we do have some organizations, including my own, that care deeply about the issue and would love to talk to you offline about it.
We're also members of Greenlining.
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Two questions over here. So I see, three, sorry. So Anjali's moving here to the woman in the back, and then we'll come to the man in the blue tie and then the man in the red sweater.
Hi, I'm Lee Lundergan from Stanislaus County, and I'm a registrar of voters. And there's two comments I wanted to make based on a couple things that were said here today. First, with regard to Steve Weir's comments on the signatures and younger people's signatures not matching that on the ballot envelope. What we're finding in Stanislaus County, and I'm sure they're finding this throughout the state as well, is the registering online is not a current signature. When they sign up online, they're getting whatever the last DMV signature was for that individual. And I'm hearing now discussion of signing people up to register to vote when they are 15 years old. And can you imagine the change from 15 years old to 18 or 20 or 30 or whatever age level when they actually start sending in ballots? So there's a deep concern with regard to that. In our county alone, and I do not have figures, but the number was astronomical as to how many registrars, paperwork, affidavits that we had to send out to people that registered online to have them re-register on a piece of paper so that we could actually read their signature and use it properly for an election. So that's definitely a deep concern we have. It would be tremendous if people could register online and be required to have their signature. So they were signing something current rather than something that was multiple years old. So, I mean, think about yourself. When's the last time you actually had to go into DMV to get your picture and your license? They try to do it as seldom as possible. So if you are registering that way, no matter how old you are, that could be a very, very old signature. And a huge, deep change from when you're young to when you're not so young, I don't know.
Right, right.
Anyway, that was one comment. The other comment I wanted to make was with regard to schools, and we're very active in our area, especially with the school program that allows students to be poll workers, student poll worker program. And what we're finding is, and I know that the comment was made, talk to the school districts. The school districts have zero power to impact or influence what a principal does at their school. And when we contact the schools, we contact the individual principals, and we're finding if they have an interest, we can get into that school, and we have dozens, hundreds of student poll workers who wish to participate. And if there's no interest, zip. We have no one at all from that school. So really the interest level is not in the individuals who are on school boards, it's the actual principals themselves, and then it would be the teachers in that program that could be, brought along, I think, and bring so many more students in. What we're finding is that anyone who is part of the student poll worker program turns out to be a voter. I mean, they've been engaged, they've been interested in it, it's just a marvelous program. So
You hook 'em young.
those are the two things that we would like to see,
Great.
specifically signatures that match and students that actually hear about the program and can participate.
Okay, we've got Jennie and Dean, so you want to...
On the signature match issue, you raise a valid point on pre-registration. One good thing is that your signature is on your driver's license. So we need to do better education as people register online to say, take a look at your license. If that's not your current signature, print, sign, and mail so that the county has your current signature. But there are things we can do potentially with the DMV. I don't know how often people come in to renew their signatures. I believe it's up to every they can be quite old, so there is some work we need to do on that. But I do want to send a quick shout out to all 58 county registrars. Most of you realize that all counties had to upgrade their systems, but you don't realize how quickly they had to do it to do online voter registration. And again, we went from receiving funding for this program last January to designing and building the system to rolling it out to all 58 counties in late August. And so each county registrar is responsible for the success of this program because SB 397 said we couldn't go public until all 58 counties were on board. So while we had our lead counties, Neal Kelly in Orange County, Dean Logan in LA, Dave Hunt in Trinity, working with us on the actual design, every single registrar had to literally overnight accept a software upgrade and train staff. And the procedures were, some registrars told me in a notebook on how to process these registrations. So I just want to thank every one of you for making that happen right before a major presidential general election. So those upgrades happened in late August. We went live on September 10th. So just so that you understand the miracle that was this system rollout last year. And thank you to Lee.
Dean, did you have a quick word?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. As a colleague, I think we all dealt with those issues, and those are issues that we deal with in the nature of voter registration and vote by mail in general. They were enlarged by the online voter registration process, and we definitely need to be looking at those. But I wanted to offer that I hope one of the things that I'm encouraged about this effort in this forum is, as I said in my opening remarks, is the focus on the future. And when I look at proposals for pre-registration of 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and when I look at proposals to try and address the signature match issue, it occurs to me that I'd like to push us to, while we're dealing with those symptoms in today's environment, to push us to look bigger than that at the future, because the reality is they're not teaching penmanship in school anymore. Our next generations of voters are not going to have consistent signatures, and there's so much inherent in the elections process that is validated through a signature match. Wow. And we're going to have to come up with a replacement for that, because signatures are not going to be the best method to validate moving forward. And there's not a lot of talk about that. So those are the kind of discussions that I think this forum, we could lead in the nation on that, and it's an issue that the nation is going to face. I'm convinced of it, and it's not just on ballot reconciliation, it's on petitions, it's on nominating documents, all of those things. And the same thing with the pre-registration. It's a great symbolic effort, but we also should be looking larger to efforts that are going on nationwide to modernize voter registration in general. And in this day and age, are there ways where we can be identifying through data matching unregistered eligible population and getting them on the rolls in different ways than the way that we have traditionally done it? And there's some great work being done by the Pew Center on the states on that, and California has opportunity to get on board with that too. So I just hope as we're dealing with those symptoms and the short-term issues that we can come together and have the larger discussion as well.
Great, both somewhat scary, but also exciting possibilities. And I know that I saw David Becker in the room from Pew. There he is. Okay, so he just wave one more time. Okay, if you have questions because the voter registration modernization is fascinating to you, or you have no idea how that would work, but you're interested, go and ask him. Okay, question, and then the last question is going to be from the gentleman in the red sweater. Yes.
Oh, my name is David Carey. I'm a democracy educator and also an advocate for representation for all. If I may, I'd like to give a quick answer to one of the earlier questions before I ask my question. The question was about levels of participation with ranked choice voting. In general, the levels of participation with ranked choice voting have increased where it's been implemented. In Oakland, for example, members of the city council are typically elected with twice as many votes as they were under their old system, and the majority thresholds that they have to reach to be elected are about twice as high as they were under the old system as well. So it's made a big difference in the level of participation. The question that I have is also related to participation. And it's probably fitting here 2 days after our commemoration of Martin Luther King Jr. that the Federal Voting Rights Act opened the door to expanding our idea of what participation meant. That it involved more than just registering and casting a ballot and having that vote counted. That it also meant having that vote count, to have it be effective in electing a representative of the voter's choice. In this last election, more than 1/3 of California voters were disenfranchised. They did not get the representative of their choice. Very often, for many of those people, the person who is elected to represent them represents the opposite of what they want. They elected, in effect, an anti-representative. That's more than 4 million California voters. So while I very much applaud the efforts that have been made to expand the pool and bring more people into the pool of active voters, the question I'd ask the panel is what can we do to expand your measures of what participation is to also include the effectiveness of participation in electing representatives of the voter's choice so that all voters are represented?
Do you want us to answer? So, thank you. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about, right, when we talk about the future of California elections. I think, so at Greenlining Institute, I think it's no secret that we talk about diversity all the time. We want to see candidates that look like us, that are going to represent low-income issues, various community of color issues, right, that aren't always addressed by a candidate that doesn't get it. But beyond just the color of their skin, we need all candidates to understand what the issues are. And so I think what you see with the partnerships that we've built is sort of a model that can be used too for bridging the gap between the constituents and their elected officials, and that's something I'd like to see more of. At the end of the day, you've got hundreds of thousands of people who make up any assembly district or senate district and so forth. Not everybody's going to be happy, maybe not with the candidate choices that are even on their ballot or who ends up getting elected. So I think how we work in partnerships to close that gap is probably just as important as who's in office.
And I think there certainly are some methods of voting that break what we think are traditional, but may not even be so traditional even to American history, but whether it's instant runoff voting or proportional voting or thinking outside of the box, like not having a legislator draw their own district lines.
At-large districts.
At-large
still an
districts,
issue?
changing to, multi-vote or multi-member voting. So lots of interesting ways of changing how we even designate how that vote is counted or how we allocate that vote. And I think that those are all interesting things for us to continue discussing and educating each other around so that those can be part of the discussion. So thanks for bringing up that issue. Yes, and last question so that we can...
Hi, my name is Darius Kemp, and I'm the Organizing Communications Director for the University of California Student Association. I really love this conversation, really excited. Got a lot of students involved this year from the UC system. I have a question, but to comment on this whole idea of signatures as well, the first thing that came to my head is that, a friend of mine works for Square, and I use Square at least 3 times a day on any given day. Square's if anyone's ever bought something and they've had an iPhone or an iPad with them, and then you just sign with your finger, that whole thing was kind of pioneered by a company called Square. And so, my head was like, why isn't there a technological answer to getting a new signature? A lot of our students on campuses, pulled out tablets to register people online. If the online voter registration system could just simply have an ability to sign with your finger or sign with a stylus on a tablet or a phone. And these are just ideas. Technically, it may be very, very difficult and or illegal to actually implement, but
laws can change.
But there has to be some way. But the real
I'm glad
question,
you're going in that direction because I thought Dean was thinking about biochips and iris scans, and it was starting to kind of freak me out.
I'm very anti, computer chips and fingerprinting and iris scans. But the real question I had was about on election day and even on the last day to register to vote, a lot of the questions that I dealt with being out on the field, dealing with my staff and dealing with the student organizers on all the UC campuses was always about the legality of what's going on. An administrator would come down and say, oh, no, you can't do that. Or some student would say, oh, no, that's illegal. And my phone would blow up and I would be answering at least 8 calls every 3 minutes about, Darius, they said I can't do this. Darius, they said I can't do that. And me reaffirming them and telling them what the law is and explaining stuff to them. And so in terms of this whole conversation is about partnerships,
You want the cell phone number of the Secretary of State's office.
Oh,
so
trust
you
me,
can
I
direct those
called.
questions. So you can direct those questions to Jennie.
I called a couple of times, as a matter of fact. But the students, and at the end of the day, I'm a resource for our students on the UC campuses. I don't know what every other system and every other student around the state has at their disposal, and I can't answer every question that they all have. And so, I think from my standpoint, our students get caught up in basically older people or other people basically saying, no, you can't do that, that's illegal. And a lot of times what those people are saying is wrong, and our students are right, but they don't know how to fight that or to argue that. And we've worked with different groups and organizations on some smaller levels with lawyers or having people in polling places, but sometimes the questions come up days before the election or right after the deadline is passed. So maybe finding some way to and some counties don't, I call, and on election day, those days they're just busy. So what are our options here to really bridge the gap between people that want to get involved, want to get engaged, but then they're being told that they're breaking the rules or breaking the law when they think they're not, and they're not in many cases.
Okay. All right, Jennie, yes.
So on the voter registration card is the Secretary of State's hotline. And Janeline's sitting right over there. She heads our elections division. And we not only have just about every staffer in elections division staffing that line, we actually pull in people from other divisions, business programs division, state archives, whoever can do it, actually. And we work in shifts around the clock, and we staff up more and more and more as we approach election day. That number's available in English and Spanish. We have voicemail for the other languages, and we return calls there as well. So, you know, as you're helping people register to vote, that's on the paper form. It's on the website where you register to vote. In the right-hand column, there's a what do we call it? I think we call it an accordion. If you click there, you will get that number. So please always call us when questions like that come up. We are staffed, and we are answering phones live. But, you know, there may be ways for FoCE to collaborate on this and just do some education ahead of that crunch time so that people don't worry about what's legal.
That's an interesting idea to think about a collaborative where,
Yeah.
with a simple piece of information, handout or whatever, that is official or quasi-official because it comes from election officials. I think that's important because many FoCE members actually also run hotlines, as do the counties, but you're absolutely right that as you get closer and closer to election, wait time on those county hotlines can be 40 minutes or more. And it's not because they're not trying very hard, but there's a lot of questions coming up. So I think that that's a good issue for us to put down. How do we be responsive to questions that are coming up and figure out a better way to both get information out there, but also maybe collaborate to figure out how we can combine resources. And if one hotline's not working, you can roll over into another one. Good collaboration between election protection, which Common Cause and ACLU and many other organizations work on, along with NALEO's hotline that has this rollover feature. So you call one, if you need language assistance or it's busy, it rolls into another, and maybe we can figure out collaboratives that tap into that as well.
Yeah, and just real quick, so first, hi Darius. It's nice to see you in person. On the technicality of the signature thing, we actually do that on mobile phones and tablets in other states, so technically not that hard, but there might be a legal issue here in California, so for all you policymakers, something to think about. But then in terms of the collaboration, this is a perfect articulation of what happens on the election days, or election day and the days surrounding it. We're just being bombarded with questions that are often about process more than anything else. And so that's what has led us to think a lot more about the civic education, but maybe there are collaboratives and ways to bring together the students in each of those campuses with the county elections officials, and I'd love to help figure that out. So let's put that on the table for later discussion.
Let's partner. Excellent. Let's
Can
give
I
our
just
panel.
add really quick that it would also be helpful if you have data about those so that you can let us know what the issues were, how many calls you got, or which calls you got the most about. Now's the time to get that data to us because that will help us to prioritize where we need to work on our efforts and improve our services as well.
Great. Let's give our panel a warm round of applause. And if I could invite our next panel to come up.